Okay, so hello everybody. How are you tonight? Hi Dolores. And hi Kay. Hi Troy. Thank you for sharing, Troy. Thank you for liking. Hi Lana. Hi Bonnie. And hi Ghost Start. Yay, old gringo. I have company tonight. Otherwise known as Steve Gonzo. Troy says, Salute, hola, moshi moshi. Oh, moshi moshi's pretty good. And Stacy Van Veen joins us. Hi, Stacy. Says, hi, my peoples. Okay, let's begin with a baseline of something horrible. Specifically, a piece which appeared in Common Dreams a few days back. It was on March 8th by Jessica Corbett. Frightening new data shows humanity has degraded or destroyed 2/3 of the world's rainforest. Here's a picture of a big fire. The Rainforest Foundation of Norway did an analysis, found that human activities, including logging and land use changes often for farming, have destroyed 34% of old growth tropical rainforests and degraded another 30% worldwide. So that's terrible, right? Absolutely terrible. Deforestation in South America, particularly within Brazil, home to the majority of the Amazon, has caused recent alarm given the role of rainforests in trapping carbon. Standing forests, says Nancy Harris, who's the Forests Program Research Director at the World Resources Institute, said earlier this year, quote, standing forests absorb carbon, but clearing forests releases it into the atmosphere, unquote. The forests emitted an average of 8.1 billion metric tons of carbon annually between 2001 and 2019 due to deforestation and other disturbances, but also absorbed 16 billion metric tons per year over the same period. Reuters said on Monday on the rainforest networks, the Rainforest Foundation networks and the Rainforest Foundation of Norway's analysis. Quote, as more rainforest is destroyed, there is more potential for climate change, which in turn makes it more difficult for remaining forests to survive, said the report's The author of the report, Anders Groh, a tropical forest researcher. Groh is spelled Krogh. It's a terrifying cycle, Groh said, and quote again, the total loss between just 2002 and 2019 was larger than the area of France, he found. Deforestation in Brazil has surged since far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, a foe of both environmental regulations and indigenous people in his country, took office in early 2019. The forest loss in Brazil hit a 12-year high in 2020, according to imagery from satellites from the Brazilian Space Research Agency. So destruction is going on. Rainforests are disappearing globally, which represents a very, very big problem for us. Doesn't look like things in Brazil are going to change, at least until the next administration. Fortunately, Lula da Silva has now been exonerated of all crimes, and he can run again. And hopefully he will sweep in the upcoming elections, and hopefully Bolsonaro will be a name of the past. We can hope. The chances are probably good, though undoubtedly Bolsonaro will pull out all the stops, as Trump did here, to try to stay in power there. But this brings to the fore, once again, the climate emergency. We have the climate emergency here, too. We have to begin to cope with it. We have not been doing that. So, in this context, we have an announcement from Bernie today. So this is from an email from Bernie. He says, I'm writing to ask you to contribute $2.70 to help organize for a second reconciliation package to transform this country. This COVID relief package is a huge step forward for our movement, but our work is far from over. So please chip in if you can afford it. Thanks, B. And there's Bernie's logo. Bernie says, Joseph M., what a year has been. The terrible pandemic has taken over 500,000 lives. The economic collapse has led to large-scale unemployment, massive loss of income for working families. The shutdowns of schools has disrupted the education of young people from pre-K to graduate school. That is the very bad news. But the good news is that in November, Grassroots America stood together and we won the most important presidential election in American history. And in January, in a major upset, the Democrats won 2 Senate seats in Georgia and became the majority in a 50-50 Senate. Elections have consequences, and I'm proud to tell you that because of your hard work and determination, because of the great work done by the Congressional Progressive Caucus and many of us in the U.S. Senate, we have just passed the most significant piece of legislation for working families in the modern history of our country. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan will provide significant help to those who need it most, but it will also do something more. At a time when many Americans are giving up on democracy, it will help restore faith among the American people that we can have a government that works for all of us, not just the wealthy and the powerful. This legislation is a great victory for the progressive movement and the struggling working class of our country. And it is enormously popular. According to a recent Pew poll, 70% of the American people support the legislation, including 94% of Democrats. And we did this without one Republican vote. This is a 628-page bill, so I can't tell you everything that is in it. But here are some of the most important provisions. Increase direct payments to $2,000 for working families. 85% of American households will receive a direct payment check. Under the last COVID relief bill passed in late December, working people received $600 in direct payments. Now, under this new legislation, they will receive $1,400 payments. Individuals making up to $75,000 and couples making up to $150,000 will be eligible, and additional payments of $1,400 will be provided per dependent child, which, by the way, was a big addition to this bill, because as you may remember, the $1,200 payment bill only included $500 for each child. Extend supplemental unemployment benefits of $300 per week through September 6th. Benefits were set to expire on March 14th. Now they will be extended for another 25 weeks. This will be a huge relief to unemployed workers who are worried about losing their only source of income. They will also be eligible for a $10,200 tax exemption for unemployment payments. Just out of curiosity, if I can find my calculator, which is here somewhere, I will do 25 times 300. That's only $7,500. So the point being, this 25 weeks, of unemployment insurance will be tax exempt. So that, of course, is very good. So the bill also cuts child poverty in half by expanding the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 and increasing it to $3,600 for kids aged 5 years old or younger in the United States. Today, we have one of the highest rates of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. By expanding the child tax credit, we will be able to substantially reduce child poverty. Not really, I wouldn't say. That's only because of how we defined child poverty. But it will be a good thing for families, of course, to get the extra $3,000 or the extra $3,600 for this year, which then would enable the family maybe to escape a little bit of the poverty they may be condemned to, which then, of course, will also reduce the poverty of the children, or in some cases, maybe remove the children from being in poverty. Next, provide housing assistance to millions of Americans who are struggling to pay their rent, utilities, or mortgage payments. When the moratorium on evictions ends, people will get the assistance they need to stay in their homes This bill will also confront the homelessness crisis in America. Yes, it will do something for these things, but of course, it's not enough money to end that crisis. It's probably not enough to make up the arrears in rent that many people are going to have when the moratorium ends. Next, it will provide substantial funding for vaccine production, and distribution. Next, it will offer significant relief for restaurants and small businesses who have been devastated as a result of the crisis. It will provide nutrition assistance to the 24 million adults and 11 million children who currently suffer from food insecurity. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we can no longer tolerate hunger and the long bread lines that have stretched mile after mile during the pandemic. Next, it will protect pensions for millions of workers by providing financial support for pension plans that are severely underfunded. Workers have earned those pensions, and they must receive them in full upon their retirement. It will prevent mass layoffs of public sector workers at the state and city levels with strong funding for state and local governments. It will provide funding for schools so they can reopen safely, including a major increase in funding for after-school programs and summer enhancement programs. Double the funding for community health centers so that people can get the health care they desperately need. Community health centers provide primary, dental, and mental health care, as well as low-cost prescription drugs to millions of Americans, the majority of whom are people of color and low-income people. And finally, ensure our veterans receive the health care they have earned and deserve by increasing funding at the VA. But let us be clear, while this legislation is a major victory for economic, racial, and social justice, but much more needs to be done. The second reconciliation bill we have to pass must address the broader structural challenges our nation faces, which is an admission, of course, that this first bill did nothing to address the structural challenges our nation faces. He goes on, among the many other issues we must confront is the need to combat climate change by transferring our energy system away from fossil fuels and into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. We must also rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of new units of affordable housing. Today, let us acknowledge this important step forward for our movement. We fought, we stood together, and we improved the lives of many millions of working families. Thanks for all you are doing. In solidarity, Bernie Sanders. And there's a little graphic there as well. The American Rescue Plan was a huge step forward for our movement, but there is still much work left to be done, and Bernie cannot do it alone. Can you make a $2.70 contribution to build the kind of organizing effort we'll need to convince Bernie's colleagues in the Senate to pass a second reconciliation bill that will forcefully address the needs of our people during this unique moment in American history. So that's his fundraiser. Okay, it is to the point. It does recognize this reconciliation bill is not enough, but has to be the beginning, of something. In going over his bullet points, you see why he was for the bill, in spite of the fact that probably the most important provision in the bill, specifically the minimum wage provision, was cut out by the Democrats. But Those bullet points are the reasons why he still supported this bill. Those bullet points, plus the fact that he's going to get another crack at things through the second of the reconciliation bills that he would like to do. So he is a little bit celebrating, isn't he? That's what he's doing, a little bit, celebrating. And here's Ryan Cooper doing a little celebrating of his own. This is from The Week. It's March 9th. How Democrats learn to stop worrying and hand out fat stacks of cash. Over the weekend, the Senate passed one of the most ambitious pieces of legislation in American history. Democrats' pandemic relief bill, also called the American Rescue Plan, ARP. All indications are the House will whisk the Senate's version through in a final vote Tuesday. Actually, it was today that it took the final vote, and President Biden will sign it by the end of the week. Yes, Joe Biden is away right now, and he will sign it when he gets back so that there can be a signing ceremony on Friday. Despite some unnecessary compromises and walkbacks, the vast majority of the plan went untouched in the Senate debate. Unnecessary compromises and walkbacks, says Ryan Cooper. Many important measures weren't even mentioned at all. For those who remember what this point in 2009 was like, so he compares to 2009. All this is very confusing. Democrats back then had gigantic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Yes, I remember it well. 58 senators they had. They acted like they had 28. I shouldn't say that. That's a bit of an exaggeration. And what was it, 243 members in the House or 244 members of the House? These were gigantic majorities. Plus an extremely popular new president, who unfortunately was a neoliberal swine. But they cheaped out on their response to the financial crisis. Of course, they cheaped out. Today, the party has a tiny 5-vote margin in the House, controls the Senate only by virtue of Vice President Harris' tie-breaking vote, and elected a famously moderate old white guy as president. Famously neoliberal, too. Yet despite having literally zero margin for error, the ARP is more than twice as big as the 2009 by Recovery Act, which is a lucky thing because this crisis is more than twice as bad as the 2009 crisis was, and structured far more generously, says Ryan Cooper. Effectively, Democrats are betting that blasting trainloads of money down the income ladder will pay off both economically and politically. Maybe they're getting back to that old winning formula. Harry Hopkins' winning formula. Was it Harry Hopkins or Harold Ickes? I can't remember. I think it was Harry Hopkins who used to say, tax and spend, tax and tax, spend and spend, elect and elect. That's what Harry Hopkins used to say during the New Deal period. I know we don't need the taxes for revenue, but we do need the taxes to disempower the overly wealthy. We need them for that. So never forget that. I can't believe I'm writing this, says Ryan Cooper, but it seems Democrats learned from their mistakes. Did they really? I wonder. Or is it too soon to say that there will be more because they learned from their mistakes? You also can't generalize about all the Democrats. Has John Tester learned from the 2009 mistakes? He was there in 2009. I remember he had just won. Has Joe Manchin learned from 2009? Has Kirsten Sinema learned from 2009? I think she was in the House in 2009. I don't think she was in the Senate yet. I don't think those three have learned a thing. I'm not sure Tom Carper or Carlton Coons have learned anything. I'm not sure Maggie Hassan and Jean Shaheen have learned anything. I'm not sure Angus King has learned anything. There is tens of billions for vaccine and pandemic containment, which should nicely accelerate the rollout that is already going well. At time of writing, about 90 million shots had been administered, and the rate of daily vaccine shipments was nearly 3 million. Then there are $1,400 checks. These were pointlessly trimmed down with a steeper phase-out that pulled partial payments from about 17 million people. But still, roughly 280 Americans will get the full whack, including an estimated 26 million adult dependents who were left out of previous rounds of checks. So it should be noted that while some people who got checks from Trump won't get them from Biden, more people will get checks from Biden than got checks from Trump, just for the record. Then there is a continuation of the $300 per month supplement to unemployment benefits, cut down from $400 in the House version, which will last through the first week of September. There is also $350 billion to help state and local governments deal with the fallout of the pandemic. Then there is a major expansion of the child tax credit, which will be increased from $2,000 per child to $3,600 for children under 6 years old, and $3,000 for children between 6 and 17. More importantly, the work requirement benefit phase-in will be eliminated, meaning that the poorest people without any labor income will qualify, and the benefit will be mailed out periodically. Yes, every month, $300 a month. If you have children under 6, $250 a month if your children are between 6 and 17. But that's not all. There were numerous smaller provisions tucked into the bill that would count as major legislation in any normal time. There is a 15% boost in food stamps and $50 billion for low-income rental assistance. That is very, very important. There is an $86 billion bailout of 185 union pension plans that were on the verge of going bankrupt. Taxes on the first $10,200 in unemployment benefits during 2020 will be eliminated. That's good. There is $10 billion for local infrastructure spending, $50 billion in rental assistance, He repeated that. 30.5 billion for transit agencies, 8.5 billion for rural health providers, half a billion in homeless relief, 200 million for Amtrak, a change to include senior citizens in the earned income tax credit, and many more things. Now, I could complain about a lot of this. The CTC expansion is structured, that is the child tax credit expansion, is structured in a goofy, incoherent fashion and lasts only 1 year. Though that does give Democrats a chance to do it right if they make it permanent, which they are planning to do. Some Democrats are, of course, but will Manchin, Sinema, and Tester really go along with that? Who cares? If they don't go along with it, it won't pass. So we care. The checks walk back was politically stupid. Excluding an increase in the minimum wage to $15 per hour was bad. And seeing so many Democrats vote against it was worse. Boosting the earned income tax credit for seniors makes no sense. Social Security should have been boosted instead. Count me in for that. But all that said, it's a hugely ambitious bill, just by itself putting Biden in league with Lyndon Johnson as a poverty fighter. All the various provisions will cut overall poverty by a third and child poverty in half, according to one estimate. Whether or not that particular estimate is correct, we have to note that since all this is temporary, it's only going to do that cut for 1 year. We'll be back to the same old next year, unless the Democrats can make it permanent. It remains to be seen whether Democrats can make these programs, above all the child benefit, permanent, says Ryan. But unlike Obama, Biden will surely be remembered as a president who at least attempted to be transformative. Well, Ryan, I wouldn't give him that much credit yet. It's too early. So what gives? Well, by the way, there was a little piece this morning. It's on Twitter, actually. Juan Gonzalez? I forget. On Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman's partner on that, had Stephanie Kelton for a very short statement. And he asked her whether she thought that now that this was passed by the Democrats, they would follow the pattern of 2009, rest on their laurels on this one, and go into the 2022 election, hoping to win based on the strength of this bill. And what did she think about it? And she said, I surely hope not. There's got to be more done than this. We need to do things that are structural about the economy, about our long-term problems in the economy. And Steph made a very firm and forward-looking statement on that, suggesting that hopefully the Biden team is not going to stop here. And we've already heard, of course, from Bernie Sanders. So what gives, asks Ryan. Democratic wonks and politicians stress They very much do not want to repeat the mistakes of 2009. Quote, Mr. Biden's economic team, unquote, is betting the transfer payments will, quote, power a rapid increase in economic growth, reports the New York Times, and thereby boost the party's political fortunes. Quote, what happened in 2009 and 10, we tried to work with the Republicans. The package ended up being too small, and the recession lasted for 5 years. People got sour. We lost the election, unquote. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told the Washington Post. The, quote, mantra of the White House and the Federal Reserve has been that it's better to err on the side of doing too much than doing too little, reports the Post in another article. Meanwhile, the boost to child benefits builds on an argument that has been developing for years among liberal and leftist scholars. Instead of conditioning family support on work, the thinking behind the Earned Income Tax Credit and welfare reform back in 1996, the state should simply establish an income floor for families, as is done in many of the European countries with much lower poverty, less social dysfunction, and a greater fraction of the workforce employed. That naturally fits in perfectly with the desire to greatly boost the purchasing power of the poor and the working class. In 2009, so-called moderates took a stimulus that was already half the size it needed to be and lopped off another $100 billion for no reason. Despite some theatrics during the Senate vote, that did not happen this time. The reason apparently is that Democrats have grasped that it was not cautious or small c conservative to leave the economy unfixed a decade ago. For the moment, at least, they're going to try the novel strategy of trying to improve the lives of the American people and hope they get rewarded at the ballot box. Progress, exclamation point, says Ryan Cooper. So, it may be too soon to lavish such praise on the Democrats. Yes, they are spouting the idea that they've learned their lesson of 2009. They're not going to stop until they've put in enough so the economy is fixed. But there are, of course, countervailing things happening. Before we go on to those, we're going to check out, another article from the week. Until we get to some of the countervailing thinking. This piece from the week is by, who's it by? It looks like it's by the week staff because it does not have a name on it. I could have sworn it had a name on it. Well, maybe the name is going to appear. Anyway, 5 economic predictions about Biden's COVID-19 relief bill. But this article was done before the bill was passed. It says, the House is expected to pass the Senate amended version of President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill Wednesday before sending it to the Oval Office for a presidential signature. Here are 5 predictions on how the stimulus will affect the U.S. and global economies going forward. U.S. growth. A group of economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal forecasts a year-over-year 5.95% bump in economic growth in the United States in 2021, an increase from their January projection. Some economists suggested the prediction is conservative, But either way, it would be the U.S. economy's fastest burst since it grew 7.9% in 1983, which, by the way, was the burst that probably saved the election for Ronald Reagan in 1984. Just saying. Morgan Stanley expects the U.S. economy to grow by 7.3%. So that's one prediction. Possibly 7.9%, but even if not, nearly 6%. Added jobs. The Wall Street Journal survey anticipates employers adding an average of 514,000 jobs every month over the next 4 quarters. Every month. That's 1.5 million jobs per quarter. That's 6 million jobs over the next 4 quarters, which is going to greatly cut into not just the U6 unemployment statistic, but the U3 unemployment statistic, and probably also create a considerable increase in the labor force participation rate, which is a more significant statistic than the other two, though maybe not to the mainstream. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said Monday the U.S. labor market should return to its pre-pandemic health by next year. So just yesterday we were saying some people were talking 2023. Yellen is saying this is going to happen by 2022, not 2023. I think if we get that second recon bill by this summer, we may well return to full employment, maybe close to true full employment, before the end of this year. While Bloomberg reports several economists similarly see the jobless rate falling back to around 3.8%. Then there's global spillover. The OECD on Tuesday raised its forecast for 2021 to 5.6% global economic growth, and the U.S. stimulus was a major factor in that forecast. Quote, this will not only boost the U.S. economy, but it will fuel global growth through increased demand in the U.S. and from the U.S. to the rest of the world, OECD chief economist Lawrence Boone said. Canada and Mexico particularly should benefit from this. Okay, I want you to notice, I don't begrudge the benefits to Mexico, Canada, and the rest of the world, but it's important, though, to note, if the rest of the world is boosted by purchasing power here, then that's a leakage of purchasing power from the domestic economy to foreign economies. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but I'm just stating it as a fact of what is going to happen. And one effect of this is going to be to reduce the possibility of inflation here. Because if there's a leakage of some of the added purchasing power by the federal government out of the economy, out of the domestic economy into the rest of the world, then that means more space for more government spending created in the domestic economy. So that's just a consequence of the sectoral balances and how they work. Child poverty reduction, a third forecast. A recent study found the bill's plan to temporarily raise the child tax credit should cut child poverty in the U.S. by 45%. Of course, I don't really believe that because, You cannot isolate children from their family. If their families, in their families, they have people who are making $7.25 an hour, $3,600 going to the children is not going to lift the family out of poverty. And if the family is not out of poverty, the children are not out of poverty. So let's be real about this, folks. Okay. Rising inflation. Inflation will rise. The journal survey settled on a 2.48% increase in consumer prices by December. I don't know whether that's going to happen. I don't think that can be predicted by what a journal survey says. I don't know if anybody has any good models, okay, for predicting that, or anybody really knows. That depends on the leakages from a domestic economy into foreign economies. It depends on leakages to savings, which means, okay, that it depends on the upward flow to the rich in the economy during the year and how serious that is, because there hasn't been any structural change, okay, in the economy. Because, of course, if the rich save at a higher rate, that money is taken out of the economy effectively and is deflationary. So I don't know whether inflation is going to rise. I would not take the projection of the Wall Street Journal survey on this. But seriously, they have no idea what kind of inflation is going to occur, whether it will be more than 2.48% or much less than 2.48%. Nobody really has a good handle on that because our models of inflation stink. That's all there is to it. That's the truth of the matter. And there's concern that could force the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates, potentially dealing a blow to the economy and labor markets before they completely recover. Nothing can force the Federal Reserve to raise the interest rates. It doesn't look like that's going to be a real problem because Jay Powell says that he's going to wait for inflation to occur. He's not going to try to predict that it's going to occur. He's not going to move to stem inflation if inflation doesn't occur. Okay? Nor has he said that he's going to try to maintain inflation of 2%. So even if the inflation forecast of the journal were right, it's doubtful that 2.48% is going to, quote, force the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates. Anyway, many economists expect inflation to gradually fall after a mid-year apex, making uncontrolled overheating of the economy unlikely. So people are optimistic about the effect of this bill. I am reasonably optimistic about it. I'm not so sure it's going to produce a roaring economy. I look much more to the second reconciliation bill, and I look far more to getting the minimum wage of $15 an hour one way or another. Now, I don't care whether a legal minimum wage is passed or whether Biden passes a federal job guarantee program with a minimum wage of $15 an hour for people. If that happens, it doesn't matter whether the minimum wage law itself changes. It can be at $7.25 all it likes. If there's a federal job guarantee at $15 an hour, everybody in the private sector is going to have to offer $15 an hour or nobody's going to take their damn job. So that's the truth of the matter. So there are more ways for Biden to do this or for Congress to do this than to pass a mini wage bill. They could do it with a federal job guarantee bill. There are people in the Biden administration who want a federal job guarantee. If Biden is looking to pass a real safety net that will head off cyclical behavior in the future from whatever cause, he will pass a federal job guarantee at $15 an hour. And he will persuade Joe Manchin to go along. He will point out to Joe Manchin that the miners in Pennsylvania are going to be, in West Virginia and Pennsylvania too, in Kentucky, will be losing their coal jobs more and more and more. And there have to be new jobs for these guys. And there have to be new jobs for lots of people who may be losing jobs, in downturns. And he's got to tell Joe Manchin, he knows how Joe Manchin just hates people getting free money. Well, the job guarantee is not free money. People will get paid for the community valuable work that they do. And communities throughout West Virginia would be revitalized by a federal job guarantee program at $15 an hour, especially if it were cost adjusted all across the United States so that it was consistent with the actual cost of living in his state. Maybe Joe Manchin can be sold that. Maybe Kyrsten Sinema can be sold that. I certainly hope so. And now, we do get to talking about the reasonable prospects for Democrats to really pass what they say they would like to pass. Specifically, that second reconciliation bill, and perhaps other bills as well, that might have to be passed by 50-50 votes. Ryan Cooper asks, what does Joe Manchin really want? He asked that question this morning. President Biden's rescue plan has nearly worked its way through Congress and will reportedly be signed by the end of the week. It's a big, important bill, but according to Biden's 2020 campaign, just the start of what he wants to accomplish. So attention now turns to the next possible round of legislation, which is expected to be an infrastructure package. So Ryan is saying he doesn't expect it's going to be H.R. 1. He doesn't expect it's going to be H.R. 4. He doesn't expect it's going to be H.R. 51 or H.R. 52, the statehood bills. He doesn't expect it to be a minimum wage bill. He's saying he expects there will be no more important legislation taken up by the Congress until the next reconciliation bill. And that raises the question. What about student debt elimination? What about Biden putting through some 51-50 bills in the Congress under the Congressional Review Act to repeal lots of these rule changes that were put in by the Trump administration? The clock is ticking on Congress being able to repeal those on a 51-50 vote, and there's lots of lousy Trump rules to be repealed. The Biden administration has got to get cracking on that. The Congressional Review Act has to be undertaken in both houses. It can't be filibustered in the Senate. Congressional Review Acts can get passed by 51 to 50 votes. Biden's got to put a whole mess of these through. It will be important for the American people to see how active this administration is in getting what it wants and in helping people across a broad range of issues. And Biden has got to give up his nonsense about student debt relief also. There are few things that would be more popular and get people more enthused for 2022 and for other Biden and Democratic programs than just relieving student debt. All of it that can be legally relieved, which I think is 100% of it, without Congress getting involved. Biden needs to do that. He's got to quit the baloney he's been feeding people. And he's got to do that. He's got to make himself as powerful as possible, as popular as possible. Because when that infrastructure package comes with its American streets, its bridges, its buildings, its rail lines, and repairs after a decade of austerity, and huge infrastructure upgrades to slash carbon emissions and to protect key systems like the electrical grid against weather disasters. Texas. Senator Joe Manchin would be one of a handful of swing votes in the Senate to decide whether this legislation has any chance at all. And Joe Biden will be much more able to persuade Joe Manchin if he has popularity ratings of 70 to 75% than if he's down around 50 or 45 or something like that. He's got to maintain these high popularity ratings. And the only way to do that is through action. FDR-like action. Lots of executive actions. Repealing the disasters from Trump as quickly as he can. Getting rid of Louis DeJoy as quickly as he can. Getting rid of student debt as quickly as he can. Doing whatever he can as an executive while Congress ruminates over the reconciliation bill, the next one that will be coming, hopefully by June. Hopefully Bernie and Nancy Pelosi will have the framework for it structured by June. Very important. But between now and June, this has got to be the Joe Biden show. He's got to be building his popularity with FDR-like actions in the executive branch. Joe Manchin would be one of a handful of swing votes in the Senate to decide whether the infrastructure bill has any chance at all. But in a recent interview with Axios, he said he was in favor of a major bill, but only if Republicans are included in the process. No! The Republicans say no. They're not going to be included in the process because all they ever say is no. They voted on this reconciliation bill, the first reconciliation bill. Every one of them voted no, including on the types of provisions they voted yes on last year when there was a Republican in the White House. This time, they voted no en masse. Not a one of them went over because they were completely political about it. Now, Democrats are already trying to make them pay, emphasizing that not a single one of them voted for these things, even though there were 14 or 15 of them advocating for Trump's $2,000 payments. When it came to Biden's $1,400 payments, they wouldn't go for that. They wouldn't vote for that. And it wasn't because they wanted $2,000 payments. It was because they didn't want to benefit people and see Biden and his administration get the credit. They're going to do the same thing with the infrastructure bill. If it's good for the American people, they're just going to say no. They're going to play the kinds of games they played in 2009. They'll do a little tease, a little strip tease, the way Chuck Grassley did in 2009. And they'll give Democrats hope that they'll vote for the bill if they only make this amendment or that amendment or the other amendment. The Democrats will end up negotiating with themselves, and not a single Republican will vote for the bill because Mitch will say, not a single one of you are going to vote with this bill. The only way the Democrats are going to get any Republicans to vote for this bill is to get some of the Republicans to switch parties. Maybe Joe Manchin can do that and get some of the neoliberals like Lisa Murkowski, let's say, to switch over to the Democrats, because she's probably got a Trumpist who's going to run against her in the primary in Alaska anyway. And how does she know she's going to win that primary? But if she suddenly switches over to become a Democrat, then she'll probably win the Alaska primary in the Democratic Party. Probably nobody will even contest her because they vote fairly centrist up there anyway. So then maybe he can get Republicans included in the process that way. That way. In any case, he's never going to get any Republicans who are still in that party to vote for a bill that Joe Biden is going to get credit for. That is not going to happen in the present Senate with the present way of doing business. In fact, the whole thing is paradoxical because he might get Republicans going over. He might get them going over if he gets rid of the filibuster. Why would that make a difference? Because if he gets rid of the filibuster, people will be really debating on the Senate floor. They'll be debating. They'll be talking to each other. They'll be going back and forth. They'll be negotiating some compromises like they used to do in the 1960s. If the country is moving left, people in both parties would then move left, as they did then. And certain people in the center, will compromise and get some things done which are decent things to get done. Not the kind of bipartisanship they got done in 2009, when any time they did anything bipartisan, it was picking the pockets of the American people. But if he's really interested in debate and collaborating with Republicans and things like that, get rid of the filibuster, because as long as the filibuster is there, and it's the one-click filibuster facilitated by emails from staffers, the only thing that's going to come out of that is rigidity in all the Republicans sticking together, not want to give an ounce of credit to Biden and to the Democrats. Manchin said he would consider a bill costing up to $4 trillion over 4 years. That's a big bill. But he wants to hike taxes on the rich to pay for it. He apparently thinks he really could get Republican votes for this. What I say is this: let the Democrats make him a deal. If he can get Republican votes for this, for hiking taxes on it, then let's have the tax hikes. On the other hand, if he can't get them to agree to the tax hikes and to support the bill anyway, then the deal should be made that he then comes over to the Democratic side and he agrees to pass the bill anyway without the tax hikes. Or with the tax hikes, if he's willing to go reconciliation. That's okay too. If he's willing to impose the taxes on the rich to pay for it, we'll give him that. We shouldn't have any problem, okay, in giving him that. As long as they are on the rich, as long as they're footing the bill. If he agrees to the $4 trillion, that is all to the good. But what I'm saying is, if the Republicans don't go for it, he should agree. And we ought to negotiate with him that he then will do it Bernie's way, through reconciliation. Now, how else can this happen? How else can we get him to soften his position? Well, we got to realize when we're campaigning for good things as we go forward that all the campaigning can't be on good candidates. Yeah, we want Nina Turner. We want Jason Kroll. This guy, what's his name, Lucas Kuntz, looks like he's a pretty good guy. The PCCC is interested in supporting him. There are going to be a number of really good candidates who are running, who can be added to the squad, and maybe even a few who can be added to the Senate. But it's not about the candidates in 2022 alone. It's got to be about changing the outlook of cinema and Manchin and other centrists to get them to observe and see the leftward swing among the voters in the country. We have to be supporting issue campaigns against Manchin in West Virginia because of his opposition to the minimum wage, because of his opposition to getting rid of the filibuster. And same for cinema, and same for other people. There has to be advertising against them, weakening their position in their own states until they come around. The popular movement has to be in favor of threatening the futures of these people, because we need the filibuster gone now. We need to pass H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 and the 2 statehood bills. We need to get rid of voter suppression. We need to get rid of the gerrymander. We need to pass the Voting Rights Act. All these things must be done. And of course, we need to pass the minimum wage bill. And $15 an hour has got to be only a beginning. The right place is $24 an hour on the average, cost adjusted across the country. And by the way, for the duration of the pandemic crisis, we also need the $2,000 a month checks for people. We need Rashida Tlaib's bill to be passed. It's the Tlaib Jayapal bill, by the way. I got to give Jayapal credit for co-sponsoring it and co-introducing it, okay, with Rashida. But it was Rashida and Rowan Gray who wrote that bill. The crucial background here is that while Democrats control the Senate with 50 votes, plus Vice President Harris to break ties, current Senate rules, of course, allow the minority to filibuster most legislation, raising the requirements for passing normal laws to 60 votes. Worse, a filibuster can be carried out effortlessly, requiring just one Senate staffer to respond to a single email. The modern one-click filibuster that applies to virtually all legislation was basically made up by Mitch McConnell in 2007. Why didn't the Democrats get rid of that in 2008? I ask you, for a few months, I shouldn't say 2008, for a few months in 2009, for a few months in 2009, the Democrats had 60 votes. Why didn't they get rid of the filibuster then? Had they done so, they could have passed another stimulus bill. They could have passed the Medicare for All bill, but they could have even passed an ACA bill with a public option, made themselves more popular going into 2010. They would have had something to run on. They would have not have lost in 2010, but out of fear, they didn't get rid of the filibuster. And of course, soon they lost the Senate. Took them a little while, till 2014, but in 2014, they were defeated in the Senate, and what they feared came about. The Republicans took over the Senate. The best defense is a good offense. And the Democrats have been cowering when it comes to the filibuster, behind the idea that if the Republicans take over, they must have the filibuster. They must have the filibuster to defend themselves. The Republicans get rid of the filibuster whenever they want to, whenever they think it's going to be advantageous to them. When and if they next get into power, they're going to get rid of the filibuster so they can win with 51 votes. Democrats need to beat them to the punch. It's insane not to do that. Manchin is being insane. Currently, the main route around the filibuster is the reconciliation process, which Democrats just used for the pandemic relief package, says Ryan. Now, it would be theoretically possible to do an infrastructure bill through reconciliation, but for a great many reasons, it would be highly suboptimal. The arcane reconciliation rules mean the majority gets at most 3 tries each year. That's each fiscal year. So an infrastructure bill would eat up one of those. The rules have already been bent beyond recognition compared to their original intent, but the Senate parliamentarian can still throw out individual items if she decides they don't meet the vague and arbitrary standard. VP Harris could overrule a parliamentarian, but so far the White House has declined to exercise that authority. And that's another thing that's got to stop. The responsibility for what goes into those reconciliation bills is the responsibility of the chair of the Senate. And the chair of the Senate is Harris. It's Kamala Harris. It's her responsibility. She can rule things in. She can rule things out. There was a good case to be made. Bernie Sanders made it based on the CBO finding that the minimum wage bill could easily be fit into that particular reconciliation bill. And Harris wouldn't just take up that case and overrule the parliamentarian. It's not even a case of overrule. It's Harris's responsibility. The parliamentarian is just giving advice. Guess what? Advice is just advice. It doesn't have to be taken by the decision maker. I mean, Biden has been full of it when he decided to go along with that. Finally, filling out all the necessary paperwork to fulfill the reconciliation requirements, then going through the process, which includes a vote-a-rom in the Senate, which any senator can suggest amendments to gum up the process, takes weeks or months. As we've just seen, if the Democrats had gotten rid of the filibuster on day one, let's say January 24th or January 31st, they got rid of the filibuster then. They could have gone ahead. They could have passed a checks bill. They could have passed a shots bill. They could have passed a SNAP bill. They could have passed all the things they passed in the reconciliation bill. And a minimum wage bill too, 51 to 50. They could have done bill after bill after bill after bill, all short bills, all clear bills, all bills that could easily be sold to the public because they could easily be understood because they were short and plain and for particular purposes. Instead, they have this monster 628-page bill that the public can't even read. Ryan goes on, and with an infrastructure package, it will be much harder to keep party discipline on what can be included. At best, it will take months of negotiation and squabbling to pass a bill that is less effective than it could be, and at worst, the attempt will get so tangled up that nothing will happen. And the Manchin also says he won't support using reconciliation for infrastructure, but he might be bluffing. He might be, or his mind might be changed by us running campaigns. Here is an important point, very important point, the campaign's point. The infrastructure bill is not going to hit at the earliest in June, or maybe July, maybe even later than that. But let's hope it's June. Between now and then, we got to be changing minds of Tester, minds of Manchin, minds of Sinema. I'm not worried about the Delaware senators' minds because Biden has mind control over them. They'll vote whatever way he wants them to vote. That's probably true of Hassan and Shaheen too. We got to make sure Angus King is aboard also when it comes to the minimum wage rise. I'll bet people in Maine want that minimum wage rise. We got to run campaigns against Angus King too. So between now and then, it's up to us to persuade from the outside these laggard Democrats to support a Bernie infrastructure bill. Bernie will have his say. The progressives in the House will have their say. There will be good things in the infrastructure bill coming out of it. We've got to make sure that the centrists in the Senate will also support those good things, if only for the reason that if they don't, they might stand to lose in 2022 or in 2024. Ryan says, it's also incredibly pointless. If your goal is actual effective governance, this process bears no resemblance whatsoever to how the Senate was designed to work in the Constitution, or how any constitutional framers ever, any country, have ever designed a legislator, including occupying U.S. forces in Japan and Germany after the Second World War. So when Manchin suggests that 10 Republican Senate votes will be forthcoming for a gigantic public works program, something they hate, so long as we include stiff tax hikes on the rich, something they hate even more, to offset the new spending, I simply can't believe he really thinks that. Not a single Republican voted for a pandemic relief package that was broadly similar to the legislation many of them did vote for repeatedly last year. There is absolutely no chance they will support a bunch of public goodies that would powerfully help the political fortunes of a Democratic president. In a recent profile, former vice chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party, Christopher J. Regan, suggests that Manchin has little consistent ideology on political economy, tending instead to shift with the political winds in West Virginia. But he does seemingly have firm beliefs on procedure. In particular, his, quote, confidence in his ability to build consensus and master the process of politics is extraordinary, unquote. My best guess is that he vaguely pines for the old mid-20th century days when polarization was not so extreme and bipartisanship was the general rule for most legislation, at least a little bipartisanship. Thus, his mania for getting Republicans involved. At the risk of being preposterously naive, let me suggest a way to do what Manchin says he wants. By amending the filibuster to force Republicans to have a real, honest-to-goodness debate on legislation, like the Senate of old. Again, one of the most marked features of the one-click filibuster today is that it stops the Senate from debating, compromising, or indeed doing much of anything. When a minority of 41 votes can bottle up almost any legislation, there is no point to any of that. Manchin has seemingly suggested he's open to the principle of forcing Republicans to put up 41 votes on the floor, but never explicitly. If Manchin and Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema want to include Republicans in the process and allow them a chance at real input, fine. Make them rationally, or I'd say irrationally, argue their position in the spirit of democratic deliberation and public reason. This genuinely used to happen in the Senate back in the day. Senators were infamous for blathering on at each other for hours or even days, trying to defend their position or attack their opponents. The arguments were often disingenuous, but it was thought important to make them as plausible as possible, and politics was more honest for it. One could set this up in many ways, but the general idea would be to get rid of the one-click filibuster and force the minority to work hard to block a vote, including participating in a more structured debate. As I've previously argued, changing the Senate rules to require 41 senators to be present around the clock on the Senate floor to block a bill would make it very burdensome to conduct a filibuster. To that, we could add a debate block of time in which, let's say, at least 80 senators must be present and each side would nominate one or two champions to go back and forth twice, one for and against the question, and then one reply each. Better still, we could make this debate a capstone on the reformed filibuster process. Once it's done, the senator gets a day to think the legislation over. Then it's a final up or down vote requiring a simple majority. Now, the Senate does currently have a procedure for debate, but it has become basically fake. With rare exceptions, quote, debate, unquote, is merely a way to eat up floor time in which senators take turns talking into a chamber that is empty except for a few clerks and the C-SPAN cameras, and where speeches are just excruciatingly lame attempts to get the news or go viral online. A forced discussion would not change the broader political developments that have moved the political argument out of Congress. There's no chance such a debate would produce a worthy successor to Daniel Webster's second reply to Hayne, but a high-pressure final debate where almost all senators were present and the stakes were real would fixate public and media attention. It might even motivate at least a little bit of reasoned argument. More importantly, for our purposes, this debate system would satisfy the procedural fixations of these Senate moderates much better than the status quo, and it would make the Senate less of a dysfunctional joke institution. More than a decade ago, George Packer wrote a famous New Yorker article about how most senators knew perfectly well the Senate did not work at all and hadn't for years. The main reason then and now is the chamber's ancient rules increasingly serve no function except as weapons for an ever more unscrupulous minority to use in their quest to gum up the wheels of government. So instead of sticking to these rules to preserve traditions that never existed in the first place, why not change them to produce the outcome the moderates say they want? Joe Manchin can be first to speak in favor of the Democrats' infrastructure package, and Kirsten Sinema can be his second. What do you say? Says Ryan. I say that might work. But I also say, if you can't get Manchin and Sinema and the others aboard the second reconciliation package, it is going nowhere. And if you can't, even worse, even before the second reconciliation package, if you cannot get them to go against the filibuster, to agree to end the filibuster, you won't get H.R. 1 passed, you won't get H.R. 4 passed, you won't get H.R. 51 and 52 passed, you won't get a minimum wage bill passed, you won't get criminal justice reform passed, you'll have no chance of getting a Medicare for All bill passed, you'll have no chance at anything without getting rid of the filibuster as soon as you can. Why is nothing happening? Or would nothing happen inside of the Congress worthwhile until the second reconciliation bill is ready? Because of the filibuster. Because of the filibuster. If not for the filibuster, we don't even need reconciliation bills. We don't even have to worry about the ruling of a parliamentarian. The institution will be much better for majority vote rule. That's what the framers intended. That is what we should have. The filibuster is completely undemocratic, completely illegitimate. The only people who want to stick by it are people who are afraid of what they will do if they lose. They're right to be afraid of that, but that fear should be in the service of doing good things for the American people at long last, not in the service of having an excuse they can fall back on and say, it was not my fault. It was only the filibuster. So let's be campaigning against the filibuster. Let's be campaigning against candidates who are preventing the repeal of the filibuster. That's what we've got to do if we want to be successful. I'll now move to your comments. And Lana says, Gonzo and Gringo, Motley Crew. Kay says, share. Evelyn says, hi there. Lana says, okay, that climate report really is awful. Yep. Dia says, only 30 years left on this planet. Unless we really do this, we really got to get rid of the filibuster. For that reason, too, won't get any climate bills passed. And I should have pointed out, if they can't agree on the reconciliation bill, that's also where the green stuff is supposed to be this time, in that particular reconciliation bill. If they can't agree on the reconciliation bill, they still might be able to agree on much smaller and more specific bills that can be passed 51 to 50, because there is no filibuster. We might get a large measure of agreement on those bills. Lana says, hi, Dia. Old Gringo says, Gonzo and Gringo Incorporated laugh out loud. Go Start sends an icon I can't read from this interface. Evelina says, speaking of fires, 7 Point in Patagonia right now on fire. 2 provinces, Chubut and by Rio Negro. That's in Argentina, Patagonia. Worst part, they believe these fires are not only intentional, also political in nature. The Ghost Start says, Slamils. Evelina says, points. Dia says, hi, lovely Lana. Ghost Start says, anyone know what became of the Suriname warnings a couple of days ago? Kay says, North Carolina Coastal Federation did another report today. It isn't any good news. Dia Swift says, what? Since when does federal legislation need donations? Bernie must be being pimped by the DNC. Now, I think what Bernie is asking for donations for is money so that our revolution and other campaigns can support people who will be mounting primary campaigns or advertising campaigns against Joe Manchin. I read that request as being a request for money so he can make things difficult for Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and others. Ghost Start says, tsunami. Oh, tsunami. Great, thank you. Lana Dell says, I don't know anything about surname warnings. Ghost Start says, found it, New Zealand has downgraded its tsunami warning after a powerful earthquake struck the Kermadec Islands region. Ghostart says, Kelton praised Stim, but says more is needed before 22. I completely agree with her. More is needed before 22. Much more. Old Gringo says, yes, this first bill did nothing to address our nation's challenges, or at the very least, it was too little, too late. And Evelyn says, the COVID relief bill would have been passed anyway, wouldn't it have? Oh, you mean if Trump was elected? The same bill would not have been passed. Would not have been passed. It would have been a bill much more oriented towards the rich getting stuff. There might have been the $2,000 checks under Trump. Yes. There might have been the $2,000 checks. And there might have been extensions of unemployment insurance. But all the rest that's in it for people, it would not have been there. And there would have been a lot of money that would have gone to the cronies. In this bill, there was comparatively little that went to the cronies, except, of course, the Cobra bailout, which is a bailout of the insurance company. Old Gringo says, I'm not celebrating bombing Syria was a priority, not helping the American people in dire straits. It certainly did not. Diaz said what they want us to buy progressives to support but more bills. Evelina says, they didn't pass the progressives' contribution to bills, which was the mini wage raise. That was one contribution of the progressives. But I have to point out, okay, that the progressives were the original Democrats to raise the $1,400 check idea. This was in a bill that did not pass, that was written by Rashida and AOC in the waning days of December of 2020. So that was the progressives' contribution to the current bill. It was actually the basis for Biden trying to make the case that $1,400 was $2,000. I'm sure that didn't work out in the way that AOC, okay, and Rashida wished, but that was what Biden made of that. $1,400 looked awfully good at the end of December, less good after January 5th. Old Gringo says Democrats learned from their mistakes. Big guffaw. It remains to be seen whether they've learned from their mistakes. It's too early to say that. They think they've learned from their mistakes. They point to this bill as learning from their mistakes. But the acid test hasn't come yet. The acid test is, will they support a bill that implements actual structural change? The infrastructure bill is the infrastructure/climate bill is supposed to do that. Let's see whether they do. It's obvious Stephanie Kelton has hopes that that bill will have a job guarantee within it, as well as numerous green measures. And the MMTers are working on the inside to try to get that done. Whether they'll be successful or not is another question. And Dia Swift says, the neoliberal swine, quote unquote, my favorite expression. If I had $100 for every time I went to FB jail over that, I'd have my own recovery bill. I wonder if I'm going to go to jail for saying neoliberal swine. Dia says, I read taxes will go up in this bill. I love how Schumer fingered Collins over the 2009-2010 lack of enough stimulus to pull out of the then a 5-year recession. It's great that he fingered her, but does that mean that he's not going to negotiate with her this time? Because she was one of those who was doing the striptease in 2009. And Lana Dell says, whose taxes will go up? Dia says, sorry, Lana, didn't delve that deep. I was very busy at the moment. Ghostart says, but laugh out loud, Dia. I'm doing 30 days RN, that's why I'm here. Oh. Lana says, wow, I wonder who gave Schumer a clue. Schumer probably had a clue right along. He just wouldn't say. He knew what went wrong in 2009. He knew Obama made a mistake. He just couldn't say that Obama made a mistake. I mean, how could he say Obama made a mistake and expect to be the leader of the Democrats after Harry Reid left? Ghostart said, can you still be friends on YouTube? I suppose. Why can't you be friends on YouTube? I guess you don't actually friend people on YouTube. What do? You like their stuff, right? Thea says, I think everyone is doing FB time, Ghostart. Ghostart must have laughed or smiled. Dia says, me too, Lana. It was a big acknowledgement of sorts by Schumer. It was. Probably there were a lot of people in the Congress who knew the Democrats fucked up. There were probably a lot of people in the Congress who knew Obama fucked up when he didn't pass Medicare for all. We forget. There were 100 co-sponsors of the Medicare for All bill in 2009. Wasn't as many as we got in 2018. But there was a very big group of people co-sponsoring it in 2009. If Obama had put his weight behind Medicare for All, it would have passed in 2009. Do you know how many deaths Obama caused when he did not pass it, when he had the votes to pass it? My estimate is that he was responsible for 356,000 deaths over the period 2010 to 2016 because he failed to pass a Medicare for All bill in 2009. That's a lot of deaths. That is one big failure of his presidency that nobody talks about except me.
Me.
And me, says Bonnie. Dia says, I hope they continue these bills for more years. I mean, why build us up just to let us down? There's not enough in there for single people who are sick and dislocated. STS. What is STS? Dia Swift says, BS on the jobs. COVID isn't done. No. Dia says, BS on the jobs increase. COVID isn't done. New vaccines and quarantines in the future. I suspect so. I don't think COVID's done either. I think the variants are going to give us trouble. They're going to have to be controlled by lockdowns and quarantines. That's going to have to be done. Stacy says, the plywood has doubled, so has OSB. What's OSB? Kay says, what is OSB, Stacy Van Veen? Oriented strand board, kind of like wood baloney. Comes in 4 by 8 sheets like plywood, but it's made of smaller pieces of wood. Dia says, stock market shot up today because there's no risk of inflation. Because we think there's no risk of inflation, as far as we can tell. Kay says, okay, we used to house repair, painting, but not much in actual building. Kay said, was going to have some work done here in my room of this old trailer, but might have to scale that back. Ghostart says, D is down with MMT. I suspect so. And Ghostart says, at E. Jean Carroll, hello, Mr. Attorney General. Under a pile of cases, you'll find a folder called Carroll versus Trump. You can't miss it. Bill Barr drooled over it. Old Gringo says. Are you down with MMT? Yeah, you know me. Yeah. Go start. Does an icon, which again I can't see from this interface. Kay says, getting rid of Rump's head of SSA2. Yeah. What's taking him so long to get rid of Rump's head of SSA? Maybe Biden is putting off student debt relief until right before the midterms. Oh, come on. Oh, God. If he does it now, the effect will last through the midterms. Don't worry. Those former students will be so grateful, they'll power his campaign through 2024. There's no problem. Ghostart says, that's Stephanie Kelton. Very proud to be a member of the Regenerative Crisis Response Committee, working to advocate for a durable, climate-friendly economic recovery post-COVID. Stacy says, Manchin is not senatorial material. He's an ignorant, uneducated schlump. So is Sinema their embarrassments. But they're not the only embarrassments. How many other ignorant, uneducated schlumps are in the Senate? Ghostart says, Democracy Now! It's Stephanie Kelton says the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill can't be the end of Democrats' ambitions. She urges the party to pass another package later this year through by reconciliation. Ghostart says the 1% got nothing this round. P.S. Hashtag go Nina. Lana Dell says 24 and 24. $24.24. Trying to think of a catchy slogan. Lana, that's catchy enough for me. $24.24. I like that. Kay says Harris is useless. Evelina says she's there for decoration, it seems. Harris, that is. And Stacy says, why does Harris have to do what Biden wants? She's the president of the Senate. She doesn't technically have to do what Biden wants. She is the president of the Senate. That's the constitutional role. She can make her own decisions, and she's responsible for her own decisions. If and when she runs for the presidency in 2024 and 2028, it will be a rap against her that she would not overrule the parliamentarian, whatever Biden had to say about it. It was her responsibility. And Ghostart says 22, 24, 22 and 22, 24 and 24, 25 and 25, etc. At SD Grumbine, think of the number of people who have to be radicalized and mobilized to make a dent. Then think of how lazy it is to simply throw tomatoes on social media. Kay says, if Harris was smart, she'd do her job. And Lana says, why is there limited reconciliation opportunities in a given year? Because that's what the Byrd rules said. There are up to 3 opportunities in a given year because there are 3 subject matter areas. 2 have to do with spending bills of different kinds, and 1 has to do with a taxing bill. So there are different areas in which you can go, for reconciliation. If you do a combined bill, though, that combines, say, spending and taxes, then you're down to 2 reconciliation bills a year. That one where you combine the spending and taxes, and a second one. Gringo says, entire Nevada Democratic Party raids coffers, resigns after DSA wins. Wow. And loots the Treasury. Gringo says, the good old Harry Reid machine. Wow. Ghostart says, 24 and 24, force a general strike and we'll want more. And Lana says, the Nevada story, woo. And somebody said, Ghost Art said, stays in Vegas, huh? Dia said, heck yeah, if the censors start arguing back and forth like they once did in the olden days, one of them is going to slip and let the truth of MNT out, and hopefully on C-SPAN. Right, if the sense stores. And Lana said, I used to enjoy watching C-SPAN, nerd. Ghost Art says, we really need something catchy to eliminate the filibuster. Well, maybe we need the blockbuster to eliminate the filibuster. Dia says, okay, thanks for clarifying the Bernie fundraising issue. Kay says, Jayapal is going to be reintroducing the singer-payer bill on March 17th. Yes, I announced that in the last live stream, I believe. She will be introducing it. And Go Start, and it's been improved further, by the way. Dia says, Go Start, how about since I didn't get my pony, I certainly won't keep a filibuster. Oh, I like that. That's excellent. Lana Dell says, well, I learned the hard way garbage is not allowed on Facebook. I guess swine is also verboten. How about swine in the garbage bin? Cast not thy pearls before a swine. Can't even quote Shakespeare on Facebook anymore. Mitch, Bonnie is showing me, voted 6 times to raise his pay, voted 15 times against raising the minimum wage. That is Mitch. Rahul Majumdar, how you doing, Rahul? It's been a while. Notice how the Dems are allergic to big numbers. Couldn't be 2 trillion, had to be 1.9. Madison Avenue wouldn't like it if it was 2T, right? Kay says, Obama is corporate owned. Raul says, establishment Democrats are philosophically opposed to a $15 an hour minimum wage in 2025. Time to push for $25 an hour. Right, I agree. Let's start right now. As a matter of fact, by 2025, it's going to be $30 an hour. It's got to be $25 an hour in 2025. But if you're going to phase it in until 2030, it's got to be $30 an hour by 2030. Kay says, still can't find a J&J Vax here in Northeast Ohio. They only started shipping a few days ago, Kay. There probably aren't many. And Lana says, yeah, Louis DeJoy needs to be gone too. Kay says, we really need Nina. Stacy says, a lot of educated schlumps, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Time Cotton, Ted Slimy Cruz, etc., add gravy. Well, I'd say there are a lot of educated swines and give you the same list of names. And Lana Detz says, I scroll too fast. And Lana says, can we give the bird rule the bird? It's okay by me. And Stacy Van Veen says, the Foghorn Leghorn guy, Kennedy. Oh, you mean the Mississippi? He's the Louisiana senator, isn't he? John Kennedy from there. Yeah. Who is this Ghost Start person? I am not seeing his or her posts on Lana's. Stacy, I am simultaneously streaming to Facebook and to YouTube, and the comment stream that I get on StreamYard has both the YouTube comments and the Facebook comments. That's why you can't see their posts, because they are YouTube comments rather than Facebook comments. Ghost Start, by the way, is Steve Gonzo. And Ghost Start says Senator Roger Wicker, at Senator Wicker, tried to take credit for the stimulus. He voted against. That's incredible. Got raged. Laugh out loud. And Kay says Ghost Start is a rumter. No, he's not. Lana says, which state is Wicker from? He's from, where's Wicker from? Oh, I forgot. I forgot where Wicker is from. Lana says, I signed up on the Minnesota website for the vaccine. Check if your state has a sign-up list. And Ghost Start says, ponies, photo finish, by a nose. Ponies by a nose. Dia says, Facebook is drunk with power and their fascist censorship. And Ghost Start asks, Rumter? Well, we'll stay on long enough to find out what Rumter is, but I've now caught up to your comments. So before I go, tell us what a Rumter is. Yeah, Wicker, Mississippi. Thanks, Stacy. And the other one from Mississippi is Cindy Hyde Smith, right? Kay says, sorry, Steve Gonzo, laugh out loud. And Ghost Start says, I'm further left than all of you. Stacy says, Hayes, the internet. Well, if there are no other inspired comments, I will see you tomorrow night. I'm probably going to be on this kick for some time because we need to have the Democrats make real progress in this term. We've got to do everything we can to get them to make structural changes this term, because we can't let the climate go until 2025 or even until 2023. Progress has got to be made now. Kay says, thank you all for another great discussion. Love these, and you all too. We love you too, Kay. Stacy says, I has the internet. Lana says, good night. Dolores says, thank you and good night all. And thank you, Dolores. And Dia says, yeah, Stacy, YouTube is where all the fascist book jailies are. Lana says, can we go over the Jayapal bill again to be introduced on the 17th? Sure we can. Sure we can. I don't know if I'll be ready on the 17th, but if I'm not ready on the 17th, it'll be shortly thereafter. 17th is a week from today. It's Wednesday. I'll be ready for it either the Thursday on the 18th or the Saturday the 20th. So I'll go over it in detail as soon as I can get my hands on it. Okay. You know how I love Medicare for all. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.